be the 13th.
He thinks I'm gonna say Jason! Who the fuck do you think you're dealing with, shithead? In the mid-1990s, mainstream horror saw itself in a bit of a dying period. The major three had suffered rather large disappointments. 93 saw Jason Goes to Hell make $15.9 million, premiere in second place, and then drop to 11th just a week later. In 94, Freddy in Wes Craven's very own New Nightmare, while bringing in $18 million, came in third place in its opening weekend, followed by a 7th and then 8th and then 13th place finish before bowing out. And Michael Myers in 1995 brought in $15 million and premiered in second place. A Halloween movie released around Halloween did not make it to Halloween. And it wasn't just the big three. Tales from the Crypt, which was just off of the television show on HBO, actually did better than all three, pulling in $21 million. Meanwhile, realistic thrillers like Seven, 12 Monkeys, Copycat, they helped turn the tide from something that was kind of horror but more realistic. People could go to and not expect teenagers in the audience. Mainstream horror suddenly didn't have an identity. There was no predictable future for the big three. Without the big three, everybody was afraid in Hollywood, as far as horror is concerned. Cue Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, who would come and save mainstream horror once again. Attempting to cope with her mother's murder, Sidney Prescott and her horror movie-obsessed friends are stalked by a murderer who seems to have a hard time letting the past go. Just like the major landscape changers that preceded it, like Psycho, Halloween, Wes Craven took the idea of what you think is going to happen and turned it on its head, casting Drew Barrymore, who technically wasn't a star again. This is what made her a star again. So there, you had a gamble, but you didn't. And what they did with Drew Barrymore was turn everything on its head, a la Psycho. And from there, they just reinvented the horror genre with a bunch of self-referential material, meta-type jokes, and basically holding a mirror to the audience. It was a bunch of movie kids talking about movies, referencing itself. In almost every single turn, it would reference something stupid from the past. Basically saying, hey, listen, we know all of that stuff before us was kind of hokey, kind of stupid, but we know what we're doing here. And then you add the irony factor that they knew that there was these crazy things and they'd still managed to do some of the crazy things. It somehow made it acceptable. Wes Craven's Scream managed to do the big guy mask thing that works so well in horror, and even twists that on its side by making the killer not one, but two people. Forget the fact that it was basically a whodunit movie throughout the movie. Craven and Williamson managed to balance so much about what was happening in Scream that it was a freight train. There was no way that this wasn't going to spawn something else in the horror genre. You had the realism and the whodunit aspect of a thriller, and then you had everything else for a genuine horror fan. And then they both could meet in the middle. Now suddenly in 1996, late 1996, you suddenly have this ultra-realistic, ultra-modern, postmodern slasher genre that would end up saving mainstream horror. With the success of Scream spawned Halloween, Bride of Chucky, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Final Destination. If you stop and think about I Know What You Did Last Summer as the next big horror movie that followed Scream, and to find out it made $72 million. I Know What You Did Last Summer made $72 million. Ugh. You go back and watch that movie now and it's not worth a squirt of piss. But what Scream did for the genre was it created a buzz, it created interest. You had not A-level actors, but you had some B, some C-level actors being cast in these horror movies. You had the renewed interest in everything else prior to it. And basically, Craven proved to the world that all you had to do was tweak it. Just tweak it and just wink to the audience that you understand that not all this makes sense or it's normal. Apparently, that's all that the audience needed. And with that, the horror genre was saved. To the channel question, who would like it? If you have not seen Scream yet, it's, as far as anything that's been released post 1997, most of it traces back to Scream. A lot of meta self-referential stuff in there. Kevin Williamson has even stated that a lot of the meta material in the script was partially inspired by Friday the 13th Part 6. I have gone on and made a review about that. I've always commended that movie on the comedic aspect, the tongue-in-cheek, wink to the audience about that movie.
Does he think I'm a farthead?
We better turn around.
Why?
Because I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly.
Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
Obviously, it was a little ahead of its time, but at least that spawned Scream, which spawned everything that it even resembles that now. So it's hard. There are horror movies that aren't traced directly back to Scream, but a lot of mainstream horror is really traced back to Scream. Yeah, if you want to watch a extremely polished, beautiful looking thriller, horror, whodunit, it's all of those, and you just kind of owe it to yourself. It is indeed one of the better horror movies in the last 30 years, if not top 3. So for Will I Like It, and for Horror Needs a Hero October, I am CP. I'm recording. Can it just wait a minute?